See if we can go through here and have a look. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Corin. Welcome.
Nice to be here again.
Thank you for coming.
I've visited Sean several times in the past, and he's visited me and done demonstrations for us over in the UK. But we've never had the delight of seeing inside this most amazing studio. There's literally just nothing like this outside Japan. It's the authenticity is what sets it apart, and luckily Sean, with his woodworking background as a master craftsman, you know, the detail, the finish and everything in here is of the highest quality, the highest order, the best materials. Really couldn't be any better. But I don't know too much about that side of things, so we're going to get Sean to tell us a little bit more information. And so this purpose-built studio then, Sean, how do you utilise this for teaching?
Well, I purposely designed this room so I could use it as a teaching tool for bonsai display, suiseki display, ikebana display, any type of Japanese display.
Right.
Bonsai enthusiasts know, most know that, in fact, in Japan, they have 3 different types of display. You have formal, semi-formal, and informal. And when I designed this, I had in mind to, in fact, create all 3 different tokonomas so they could be utilized and people could understand the difference between formal, informal, semi-formal, and so forth.
So for people that are new to it, perhaps don't realise some of the terminology, sure. A tokonoma, in its basic essence, is like a display alcove.
Exactly,
or,
it is.
You know?
It is. And this dates back to centuries ago, and the beginning of tokonoma was basically introduced to Japan through the Chinese monks coming from China, spreading Buddhism in Japan. And they would often bring scrolls as gifts, and the scrolls would have some kind of a poem, some type of Zen phrase, so to speak. And then all right. So, we're going to discuss the 3 types of bonsai display and the 3 types of tokonoma here at Three Mountains Bonsai School. And the first one we're going to look at is one of the most important, most commonly used, which is the formal tokonoma for display. And to depict which is which and so forth, the tokobashira, which is the main post supporting the tokonoma, in formal, it's always square. And also the tokogamachi, which is the black board you see here, which is approximately 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and it is black lacquered, and it is actually one board. And that's one of the reasons that we call it formal, because it's very prim and proper, so to speak. The next one we're going to talk about is the semi-formal. The semi-formal tokonoma is basically the same, but there are a few things that are just a little different. And one being, like I mentioned, the tokobashira, but in the semi-formal tokobashira, the tokobashira is actually round. It's straight, dead straight, but it is round. And also, the tokogamachi in the front is not black shiny, it's very subdued and very neutral. And this particular tokonoma is approximately 1.5 meters long, and it's about 1 meter deep, which works very well for bonsai. And in this particular display, we have a literati style American pitch pine, and I collected that about 3.5 years ago, probably about 20 miles from where we're at right now. And in the other side, you'll see a beautiful Japanese suiseki, and placed on a small stand with a beautiful rosewood daisa. Okay, like I mentioned earlier about the formal tokonoma, which we have here again, this is what we call a traditional three-point display. 3 points meaning there are 3 subjects within the tokonoma, okay? Obviously one being the bonsai, the second being the hanging scroll, and an accent plant here to the left. And this is a typical display that you would see in a tokonoma, but not the only type. Often there is just simply a 2-point display, which could consist of just basically the tree and the scroll. The Japanese philosophy is less is more. As Westerners, we have a tendency to overcompensate the space. Empty space is very, very important for bonsai, and it helps to give you the ability to concentrate on the tree and not being frustrated by the other things that are within the tokonoma. So if we look at the scroll to start, you'll notice at the very top, you'll see these 2 ribbons. Okay, the Japanese term for that is futai, and centuries ago, they were basically designed to dissipate insecticide to keep insects from dirtying up the scroll and whatnot. And as the light breeze would blow through, the futai would wave, dispersing the pesticide. The bonsai, this is shimpaku, and it is an American shimpaku. It was not imported. And the Japanese pot container and the display table is actually Meiji era, about 1910. And the accent plant is sitting on a hand-carved root stand that I had carved out of a piece of English yew.
Sean, you mentioned a 2-point display.
Correct.
And you mentioned that being the tree and possibly the scroll.
Correct.
Can a 2-point display also be the tree and the accent planting?
No.
So
Right.
If you've got a tree and an accent,
Yeah.
a scroll,
Yes.
but you won't have the tree and the accent.
Correct.
I
Correct.
think a lot of people, if they display, I've seen it a lot in the UK, a lot of people concentrate on the tree, that's fair enough, and an accent planting.
Right.
And then a few of them add the scroll.
Right.
It's like a third item. But what you're saying really is the scroll's a second item.
Well, theoretically, in tokugazari, which is tokonoma display,
Yeah.
there's always a scroll.
In the more formal display.
Well, for any display within a tokonoma,
Okay.
there is always a scroll.
Okay.
Okay, that's kind of the concept of it, where you're able to hang it. Now, that being said, with our symposiums and local club exhibitions, it's difficult to do something like this because you just don't have it.
Backdrop, different height.
Right, different height, tables different height, and so on and so forth. So the majority of the time, scrolls are not used in that type. Even the famous show Kokofu 10 at the Metropolitan Museum in Tokyo, the exhibit, there are no scrolls. Okay, it's just basically a 2-point display because there's no place to really hang a scroll. Right. So theoretically, when we exhibit our trees, unbeknown to most people, you're basically trying to create a tokonoma display without all the accessories needed to do it properly. Okay? And getting back to your question about the 2-point display, and this could certainly be one easily. And again, just by simply removing this. Now you've gone from a 2-point display to a 3-point display, to a 2-point display. Okay?
And would that scroll still stay in that position?
Correct.
Now you've removed that.
Correct.
It's not that there's more negative space there and the scroll would need to shift across.
No.
It would still stay.
Stay dead center.
Okay.
Now, also keeping in mind, there are many different schools of display in Japan.
Yeah.
So I don't want to contradict anyone, but the way I was taught in Japan, the scroll is always dead center, no matter what, okay? But I did create this where I have the ability that I can physically slide this anywhere I want. But again, my teacher, Mr. Morimai, it's always center.
Because obviously if you have a larger tree,
Right.
that's going to, that's going to visually potentially cut across the scroll,
Right.
as well.
Right. Right.
And is that that's not really an issue? The scroll will still be.
It's generally not an issue, but also keeping in mind, a traditional Japanese scrolls comes in many different lengths. So for instance, if you have a very large tree, you may want to consider a scroll that only hangs down perhaps this far. Okay. Other times they can go all the way to the tatami mat.
And we were discussing just the other day how on this particular arrangement the carp that is on the scroll, the way it's arcing and leaping to the left, is mimicked in the trunk and the foliage of the tree.
Yes.
And it's with the display at high level. I find it's those sort of subtleties that people are generally not aware of.
Right.
They might see that and think, I like the display,
Yeah.
until they ask themselves further. They see that display and think that works well.
Yes.
But until they ask themselves further, why does it work well?
Right.
And you say, well, one thing that I've thought I put a lot of effort into,
Right.
is matching the scroll to the tree. And
Yeah.
It's got the same sort of movement and it's the same sort of essence.
Exactly.
And therefore, these minuscule things,
Yes.
really,
Right.
but when you put them all together, it makes it a more cohesive display.
Yes. I want to share with your viewers, though, because I prepared this display before your arrival on Wednesday. So, I knew what scroll I wanted to use. I knew what tree I wanted and so forth. And, put everything in place, step back, okay, it looks good, out the door I went, right? It wasn't until the next day when I really looked at the display closely and I said, oh my goodness, look at that. That fish has the same movement as the bonsai. So, sometimes, like you just mentioned, we don't think of the little subtle things when we display our bonsai.
And you're a master of displaying stuff like this, but even again, you didn't pick up on that until the day after.
Exactly, I did not. Yeah. And it's, again, that's, often in our bonsai garden, we have many, many different trees and we water every day and, take care of the trees, and then you just walk by one particular tree in your collection and you go, oh, I got to take that branch off. Even though you might have had the tree for 10 or 15 years.
At a different angle.
Yes.
Or you've studied
Yeah.
it from further,
Sure.
further afield.
Yes.
And how many times I find that also happens quite often, if you took a photograph of one of your trees.
Yes.
And you're looking at a two-dimensional image.
Yes.
That bit there just looks wrong.
Yeah.
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 You can go to the tree and sometimes you can remove it. Sometimes you think, oh no, I can't.
That's right.
It's easy to look at a photograph and put your thumb over a little bit of a branch.
Right.
But it was better without.
Yes. Yes.
You're prohibited from doing it.
Right.
Based on the structure of that.
Sure. Absolutely. Trees also suiseki. I have many, many suiseki throughout, the building here and up top in the little garden I have. And some of them have been there for 20, 25 years. And just the other day, I was cleaning up, preparing for the open house, and I walked by the table, and I go, oh, where was that? I pick it up, the stone, the suiseki, and it was like perfect. I don't know how I missed it and overlooked it all these years. Okay. But that being said, in any art or any hobby that we practice, okay, as time progresses, you learn more and more and more, and your eye becomes more focused and more artistic, so to speak.
Yeah, more tuned in.
Yes, more tuned in, exactly. Yeah. And, there it was. And it's been sitting up there probably, 20, 25 years.
And then you've got 3 display areas.
I do.
In the studio.
Yes.
So we're just going to now finally have a look at a more informal.
Correct.
Display area.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, we'll do that next. Welcome back. So our next little conversation is going to be about the informal tokonoma, which we have here inside this traditional Japanese tea house. So as I mentioned before, the three styles of display in Japan and the three styles of tokonoma are shin, formal, gyo, which is semi-formal, and so, which is informal. And again, we go back to the main support of the structure of the tokonoma, which is the tokobashira. But here you can see it's different than the other two we looked at previously, that being that this tokobashira still is covered with bark, and it also has movement in it. Okay, it has a distinct flow of movement. And this basically gives you the effect of something that is very primitive, which the original tea house was designed to be very primitive. And of course that was through Senyu Rikyo. During the 14th century, we kind of reinvented the tea ceremony in Japan. So the interesting tidbit that most people aren't aware, the tea room tokonoma never has a bonsai. It is always something of matter. Here I've displayed a suiseki that I collected. I did not collect, let me correct myself. My fiance, Trisha, she collected that in California when we were there collecting 4 or 5 years ago. And also, traditionally the scroll is never of a painting. It's always Chinese or Japanese characters. And in this case, the scroll is displayed at the right height, and when we view, the stone is not interrupting any of the kanji on this particular scroll. Now, some people will probably contradict me and say, oh no, that's not true. When I was in Japan, I saw bonsai in every tokonoma that I went to. But you also have to keep in mind that during particular periods of time, for instance, the Westerners go to Kokufu 10 or Taikon 10, they would put a tree in the tokonoma just for show, okay? But traditionally, they're not used. And you'll notice the dimensions are quite different than what we saw outside. The tokonomas outside in the other room are all in 1 meter increments. So the first one, the formal, is, I forget now, 1.5 tatami, which is approximately 9 feet. And then it has the sub part of the display area, which is another 3 feet. So the overall is approximately 15 feet. The smaller one, which was the semi-formal, that's 1 tatami mat, which is of course approximately 1 meter by 2 meters. With tea room tokonomas, there's a little difference. Generally, they don't use tatami mat in the tokonoma floor itself. It's traditionally just a wide board. Here you can also see we have a beautiful tokogamachi, and this particular piece of wood is actually American chestnut, which in fact has been extinct here in the United States for quite some time. And this came out of a barn. It was actually a barn beam, and the barn was built in 1797. So this is quite old. It's actually very old, probably close to 300 years old. And it's very rustic, and I cut it and hand rubbed it to create as much of a natural patina that I could. And it really gives the impression of age and time and use with the shiny highlights on the wood. Yeah, wild American cherry. Ironically, I went down over the hill and cut it down, brought it up, put it in. You can't tell, but what I did, Corin, is I took a saw on the back side of it, and I went in about 1.5 inches deep with the saw blade, and I ran it the whole length, okay? And then in the back, I put in copper butterflies. You know what a butterfly is in a cracked piece of wood?
Yeah.
So I made mine out of copper.
Okay.
But you can only see half of one because after, you get it to where it's positioned, then you have to try to attach it and incorporate it into it. Again, this isn't traditional Japanese building. So normally this would be, way up into the ceiling and way down into the floor, and then the walls would be attached to it. Well, I had to do it kind of ass backwards where, once I got it in place, then I had to, actually I have auto body Bondo behind it, because it dried quickly and it would hold the support. And then there's hidden screws in here that go into that 2x4 back here that keeps it secure.
Okay, so as well as the tokonoma display in this exquisite studio, there's a few areas of all sorts of Japanese artifacts, some things that I understand and I know about, and other things that I haven't got the knowledge about that are just fascinating. And we'll get Sean in to just tell us give us some information about probably some of the more unusual things that are surrounding us in this studio. So, Sean, this area here,
sure,
is just tell us about a few of the key pieces in here. And these are things that are generally for sale, but
yes,
that are used as part of display.
Yes, these are for sale, and when I go to a show as a vendor or such, I, pack all this stuff up and take it out and so forth. But
these are not easy to find items.
No, they're not. Let me reiterate that, because 20 years ago, very difficult to find.
Okay.
The only way you were going to find them is if you went to Japan.
Okay.
Okay. Or you happen to stumble one at a flea market or something like that. But now with the internet, it's relatively easy to acquire them now.
But you did several trips to Japan through your career anyway, don't you?
18 trips.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a significant amount of trips.
Yes. So anyway, we have some pots, and some are Chinese, Japanese, and I also have some high-end tokonoma signed pots.
Just grab one of these pots and show us something that we perhaps haven't seen.
Boy, I don't know.
Something you want to sell to me.
Let's talk with this one.
Okay.
So this is a very beautiful pot, very simplistic, but a beautiful crackle glaze. And ironically, when I purchased it, you could barely see the crackle. So what I did was I took some lamp ink, and with a rag and a pair of rubber gloves, I worked the ink into the crackle of the glaze, yeah. And it just kind of exploded.
Yeah, and that's quite a light body of clay as well.
Yes,
so
yes.
On the rim, where the glaze is thinner,
right,
wide thinner,
yep.
You see the whiteness, the pure sort
right.
of clay. Just
came through, and as the glaze started to melt, it kind of separated off the sharp edge.
And that sort of size pot could be used for like a small literati tree,
correct,
or an accent planting.
Exactly.
It's quite a lively pot.
It is.
In colour, so it would need a tree that with some colour, some blossom,
yeah,
some colour in the leaf.
Absolutely.
Or a colourful accent planting.
Absolutely.
That's a real burst of colour. So if you were doing a display, in springtime,
yes,
it would potentially be used in that sort of manner.
Absolutely. And it's actually Chinese, and it's very, very good quality Chinese, and just a beautiful pot, and reasonably priced. So that's one we have there.
And all these bronzes and the figurines here.
Correct.
On this shelf. And tell the viewers a little bit about these.
Okay, these are what we call tenke or tempei, and it's a little miniaturized figure that we utilize in display. Not necessarily bonsai display, but often in suiseki display. And these small little bronze objects can help create a better understanding of the display. For instance, if you had a beautiful suiseki in the suibon with sand, unknowing about the art form would kind of probably scratch their head and they would say, well, gee, I don't get that. That's a rock in the middle of a pile of sand. But if you were to take a little boat and place on that sand, now it's easier for the viewer to actually understand that, in fact, that's actually a island stone in the middle of a lake or the ocean or something of that sort.
Because you're telling the story then, aren't you?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
It's basically like a scroll or even an accent plant. You know, we look back at the display with 3 points, and one thing I often see traveling, doing lectures and demonstrations and such, where you'll have a beautiful Japanese black pine, and the accent plant that was chosen is like some kind of a succulent plant, kittens in a cradle or something like that. And we all know that, you know, black pine don't grow in an area where succulents grow traditionally. So my teacher would always tell me, common sense is the secret to good display, just common sense. So common sense would tell you that you would not, in fact, find a black pine growing near an area where succulent plants can grow. I'm sure somebody out there will probably contradict me and say, oh yeah, you can, but normally you can't. Yeah. So we utilize these small objects to help explain it a little easier sometimes. Now there's several different types of items in here. Again, we're talking about the smaller items. They're called tempeh or tenke, okay? And they're generally no larger than 3 or 4 inches.
And you're a teacher of bonsai. You're a bit of a triple threat, aren't you, really? Because you're an amazing bonsai artist, and then you make bonsai tables, and you lecture on bonsai display, and you're one of the leading authorities on suiseki. Well, it's 4 threats, isn't it? Not 3. But, you're a bit of a one-stop bonsai shop.
Well, you forgot.
And pots.
What else do I do?
He does make some absolutely wonderful pots. I'm lucky enough to own a couple of these back in the UK, so there's not much that this guy can't do. But down here, I first knew you when you started off.
Sure.
You know, when you were doing more woodwork.
Right.
So
right.
These display tables down here.
Right.
Are these ones of yours?
They are.
So Sean started off. I first knew him when he was a master craftsman making display tables. They're custom ordered. You know, whenever you've got a tree that's going to a bonsai show, it needs to be displayed on an appropriate table. And again, there's lots of nuances and subtleties regarding the colour of the wood and the design, the shape, the style of the table.
Correct.
It's nice to see a couple of your tables here to give people an idea. And here you've got some pieces of wood on the top.
Yes, these are what we call jida, which is a small, thinly sliced slab of wood. Can be any type of wood.
Is that a piece of yew?
It is. It is UKU.
English yew.
Indeed.
Of course.
Yes, yeah. Indeed. So, you know, I make these and sell these at shows, and they do quite well because it's one of those things that as you're setting up an exhibition and you say, oh, you know what? Mine is ugly compared to that one. I think I'll buy one of Sean's.
And a lot of people will use these to put under accessory plantings.
Yes.
Or potentially under small size.
Yeah, or small bonsai, of course.
So here we've got the bronze figurines, selection of new and antique pots, and the wooden display tables. Let's have a pop over to the other side of the studio, and we'll have a look at what you've got over here for customers to peruse. So this was for many years, this is your mainstay of your interest, was the suiseki.
Correct.
Japanese viewing stone.
Of course, first it was bonsai. You know, that was the main, you know, driving force was bonsai. But then several years into bonsai, I was introduced to suiseki, and I was pretty intrigued by it, and I wanted to learn more about it. But in the West, there was very little information available.
Well, there's still to this day just 3 or 4 books in English.
Yes, there are a few.
But there's not many.
Correct. And Yuji Yoshimura and Vincent Gavello's book, which was the Japanese art of stone appreciation,
Which is the go-to book.
For me, it was the go-to book, or my Bible, or something of that sort. But there's several books out there now that have been modernly written. Dr. Tom Elias out in California has written several books about suiseki and Chinese viewing stones and such. But my passion for this kind of escalated, and
so you're known for not only your knowledge of suiseki, but utilising your craftsmanship and your years of woodworking skills to carve these bases.
Correct.
That the suiseki on here, just here, look.
Exactly.
So these are called Daiza.
That is correct. D-A-I-Z-A.
Well, that's Z-A for people that are,
Yeah, on the other side of the pond.
Watching in English.
Right.
We'll try and just translate it as we go
Exactly.
along.
Yeah. I had to translate for you yesterday, so it's fair. Any case, so this is a beautiful stone, very simplistic mountain, jet black, and as I pull it apart, you'll see that this stone is completely natural.
Yeah, not been cut.
Has not been cut or modified.
Undulating underside.
Right.
And then that Daiza has been painstakingly carved.
Correct.
To just, and I've got one of your Daizas on a stone of mine.
Yes.
And I know that they just fit like a glove.
I'm actually moving it back and forth, and it's not budging, so it's just about a perfect fit.
Solid, isn't it?
It is rock solid.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. So this is Brazilian rosewood.
And traditionally, it was rosewood that was used.
Yes. Rosewood, primarily, but hardwoods.
Yeah.
Hardwoods is a safe assumption. And then this is my Japanese seal here that my Japanese teacher created for me, and a beautiful stone, very unique stone.
A lot of these,
yes,
were displayed on these boxes.
Correct.
You made a Daiza for my stone, but
yes.
I don't think I could afford the box. So tell me about the boxes.
Okay, so in Japan, whenever you have a high quality suiseki, a storage box is generally always built for it. And the kiri, the box is made of a wood called paulownia. Back in the UK, they call it, I believe, the foxglove tree or the princess tree. And it actually grows here in the United States. It was imported as a garden tree.
And it's a very, very light wood.
Yes, very light, almost like balsa. So the wives' tale story about the kiribaku, first and foremost, it's not just for suiseki. Traditionally, anything in Japan that has any value is kept in a storage box of paulownia, from wedding kimonos, tea bowls, suiseki, pottery, numbers of things, musical instruments, and so forth.
And is it right then that the writing on the boxes is kind of is detail about what's held within it, or
right?
Where the stone was found?
Correct. It certainly can. And quite often, the information on the front lid of the box can be a number of things. It can be the location, the name of the river, the person that found it, a poem, or a feeling that person had when they collected the stone and they want to continue that on. Particularly this stone here, if you can zoom down on this one. This is Japanese suiseki, and the kanji depicts 1,000 or 1 million tiny mountains with monks. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but the stone has many tiny peaks throughout the stone, and the person who found it or acquired it, named it, and
that's what they saw in it.
Yes.
What it evoked to them.
Exactly.
And a lot of these stones, they evoke a mountain scene, and some are just object stone.
Correct.
Whether it looks, people see one and
right.
I think it can depict an animal or an object.
Right. So this stone, which I displayed it several years ago at the national exhibition up in Rochester, New York. But it certainly depicts a human figure of some sort. Obviously, this would be identified as the head, you know, the shoulder line here, and perhaps arms folded over. Again, you know, suiseki is all about one's imagination. And
so different people can see different things.
Exactly, you know. And this particular stone I found on the beach in Puerto Rico maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
And then let's just go over to this other corner.
Sure.
And we'll see what's over there. So this is the final little area. And you were telling me before that even these sail shells,
Yeah.
you went to some time and effort
Right.
to source these, because you were telling me that traditionally they would be built out of a certain type of wood.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that you wanted to do the same over here.
Correct.
And it proved to be a costly, costly but amazing.
I don't know if you want to go into it, but you know, as you know, when COVID struck the world, I broke ground to build this, and I was given an estimate to have the shell built by a company, and the quote was very good, and I said yes, we can do it. But then, as we know, COVID progressed, and then the price of everything quadrupled, in some cases tenfold. But anyway, all the wood all the light colored wood you see within the Japanese room I have here is actually Western red cedar, and it comes from British Columbia, Washington State, and it's all #1.
Shows the grade of this.
Yeah.
That it's got no knots in it.
Exactly.
And just high grade, good grain.
Right.
And when you've got such exquisite shells,
Yeah.
you can also got the luxury of filling them with such exquisite
Yes.
items.
But knots in wood in Japan is considered cheap.
Yes.
So again, this room, there is absolutely no knots anywhere, and any tokonoma I build for customers throughout the country, there's never a knot.
But the highest possible
yes,
material.
Correct. And ironically, if you ever get to Japan, you get to Mr. Kobayashi's place. He actually has a knot, but it's hidden. You wouldn't see it. Okay. If my memory serves me correctly, it's in the ceiling, gigantic board, and there's a little tiny knot there, and he kind of points it out every time when he has visitors.
And tell us about some of the things we've got tucked in here then.
Okay.
That you were telling me about this this tray here in front of us.
Yes. Yeah? This was
again a man of many talents.
Yeah, I don't want to say a science experiment, but very often in Japan they use bronze containers to display their suiseki, and they're very, very expensive and sometimes very difficult to find. So I took it upon myself to start learning how to melt copper and create dobons.
And you made that from, you said you made it from scrap bonsai wire.
Correct.
Is that right?
This is
this is another great recycling tip.
Yeah. So it's quite heavy. It's filled with sand, and you can see, the edging. And it was basically lost cast process, where I had something made this shape, and then it was pressed in foundry sand, and then we had an area where we poured the liquefied copper in, and then another place where it exited, and when the exit came, then you knew the entire mold was filled. And it weighs about 8 pounds, so it's quite heavy. But that's the only one I have, because they're quite difficult to do.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they're so expensive in Japan.
Probably why.
You're right.
Yeah, probably is the reason, isn't it?
Yeah. So the last place we were talking, you were asking about the kiribaku and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
So here, these are actually the back of the lids of the stones, of the information. And this is my #1 stone, but I won't get into the story about that. But the kanji was all done by my teacher, Mr. Morimai, from Hanyu City in Sayatama Prefecture. So some of these stones are kind of, you know, personal, and they're really not available for sale or anything like that. And then there's some other items back here like this, for instance. This is very, very similar to what we were talking about earlier about the tenpei and the 10K. Well, this is not 10K or tenpei. This is called okinomo, okay? And it's basically identical to the tenpei, but it's larger, okay? So, for instance, the tenpei that we were viewing earlier, they're quite small, like I mentioned, maybe 4 inches.
Yeah, and this exceeds the maximum size.
Yes, yes. So they work fine in, you know, a suiban or in a small display of some sort. But in tokonoma display, if I was to put a 3-inch object in there, it'd be quite difficult to see.
Particularly if it's a big, a large.
Well, yeah, full size.
And a large tree.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So the okinomo, this particular one is from Meiji era, probably 1910, 1915, something like that. And it, you know, has the artist's description underneath. And this works very well in tokonoma because of its size. It's almost life size, basically. So that's an interesting piece and one of my favorites.
Okay. Well, I hope the viewers have really enjoyed this insight into some of the, we've explored some of the subtleties of display in this amazing studio. Certainly I've learned things that I wasn't aware of, and I hope the viewers have.